The rain hammered against the windows of the Ashford estate like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Detective Sarah Mitchell stood in the grand foyer, her shoes squeaking against marble floors that probably cost more than her annual salary. The chandelier above her head, crystal, enormous, obscenely expensive, swayed slightly in the draft that somehow penetrated even this fortress of wealth. But the Ashfords were gone, vanished, and the only person who might have known what happened was lying in the county morgue with a tag on his toe. Sarah pulled her coat tighter, though the mansion wasn't cold. It was something else, an emptiness that felt deliberate, calculated. She'd been a detective for 12 years, and she'd learned to trust her instincts. This house was hiding something, and whatever it was buried deep beneath layers of privilege and power. Detective Mitchell? Officer Ramon Chen appeared from the East Wing, his young face pale. "You need to see the study. There's... strange." Sarah followed him through corridors lined with paintings worth millions. Family portraits stared down at her. Richard Ashford, the patriarch, with his steel-gray eyes and confident smirk. His wife, Victoria, beautiful and cold as winter. Their twin children, Marcus and Isabel, both in their early 30s, both bearing the same expression of entitled certainty that they'd always get exactly what they wanted. The study was a crime scene without a crime. Papers scattered across an antique desk, a safe hanging open and empty, surveillance equipment with its wires cleanly cut, but no blood, no signs of struggle, just absence where presence should have been. The butler, Edmund Graves, was found this morning in his quarters, Chen said, consulting his notes. Heart attack, according to the preliminary examination. He was 72, worked for the family for 40 years. Convenient timing, Sarah muttered, running her gloved fingers along the desk's edge. The family disappears, and the one person who would have seen or heard something dies 12 hours later. The medical examiner seemed confident it was natural causes. His heart was in bad shape. Sarah knelt beside the fireplace where ashes still held warmth. She could make out fragments of paper, the corner of what looked like a ledger. Someone burned financial records recently. She stood, turning slowly to take in the entire room. Where are the staff? A family this wealthy doesn't operate with just one butler. Most had the night off, Chen explained. Apparently that was unusual, but Edmund gave them all leave. Said the family wanted privacy for a special dinner. A special dinner where nobody ate. Sarah had already checked the dining room. Table set for 5, food prepared but untouched, wine poured but not drunk. Like everyone had simply stood up mid-meal and walked into thin air. She spent the next 3 hours methodically searching the mansion, and with each room, her unease grew. This wasn't random. This was planned with the precision of a military operation. But by whom and why? It was in Edmund's private quarters, a modest suite tucked away in the service wing, that Sarah found the first real clue. The room was immaculate, almost austere compared to the lavishness of the main house. A single bed neatly made, a small desk with a reading lamp, and underneath a loose floorboard that Sarah discovered only because she noticed the slight discoloration in the wood, a metal box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in an elegant, old-fashioned script. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she began to read, and with each page the truth started to unravel like a thread pulled from an expensive tapestry. The first letter was dated 15 years ago. "My dearest Catherine," it began. Catherine, Sarah made a mental note to research that name. "I watched him today, my employer, Mr. Richard Ashford, as he signed the papers that will destroy the Henderson family. They built their bakery from nothing, a small business that dared to exist on land he wants for his next development. He will crush them without a second thought, the way one steps on an insect. And I will serve him dinner tonight with a smile, because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. But inside, my darling daughter, inside I am screaming." Sarah's breath caught. She flipped through more letters, each one a window into Edmund Graves's hidden anguish. Letters written to a daughter who, Sarah would learn through subsequent investigation, had died 10 years ago. Suicide, according to the official report. But these letters told a different story. "Catherine, my love, if you had only told me what they did to you, if you had only trusted that your father could protect you." This letter was dated just after Catherine's death. Sarah could see where tears had stained the paper, the ink running in places. "I found your journal after the funeral. I read what Marcus Ashford did to you at that party. How Victoria paid you to stay silent. How Richard threatened to destroy my career, my reputation, everything if you spoke up. They broke you, my beautiful girl, and I bowed and served them breakfast the next morning. Sarah sat back on the floor, her mind racing. This was the motive. This was the wound that had festered for a decade. But Edmund was dead. How could a dead man orchestrate the disappearance of an entire family? She continued reading, and the letters became more calculating, more detailed. I have been patient, Catherine. 10 years I have waited, planning, preparing. They think I am loyal. They trust me with their secrets, their security codes, their darkest confessions spoken freely, because they see me as furniture. But furniture observes everything. There were pages of notes, schedules, habits, financial irregularities. Edmund had documented years of the Ashfords' crimes. Money laundering through their real estate empire. Bribes to city officials. Evidence of several families destroyed by Richard's ruthless business practices. And darker things, much darker. Marcus continues his predatory ways just as he did with you, my dear. 3 more young women that I know of. His mother pays them off. His father makes their police reports disappear. And I serve them wine and clear their plates and wait for the perfect moment. The final letter was dated 2 days ago. Tomorrow night, Catherine. Tomorrow night, justice finally comes to the Ashford family. I have arranged everything. The staff will be gone. The cameras will malfunction at precisely 9 p.m. And the friends I have made, people they have wronged, people who want what I want, will be waiting. I am an old man, my heart is failing, but I will live long enough to see this through. And then, my darling, I will come home to you. Sarah's phone rang, shattering the silence. It was the medical examiner. Detective Mitchell, I've completed the full autopsy on Edmund Graves. You were right to be suspicious. His heart did fail, but it was induced. He injected himself with a massive dose of potassium. It mimics a natural heart attack perfectly if you're not looking for it. He killed himself, Sarah said softly. After he helped make them disappear. There's something else. We found traces of sedatives in his system. Time to keep him conscious long enough to finish whatever he was doing, then let him slip away peacefully. This man planned his own death down to the minute. Sarah ended the call and sat in the growing darkness of Edmund's room, surrounded by his secrets. She understood now. This wasn't a kidnapping. This wasn't murder in the traditional sense. This was judgment, carried out by a man who had nothing left to lose and a lifetime of rage to fuel him. Over the following weeks, Sarah pieced together the rest. She found Edmund's accomplices, a construction worker whose family lost their home to Ashford's development schemes, a former police officer who'd been fired for refusing to bury evidence against Marcus, a lawyer who'd watched the Ashfords corrupt every level of the justice system. Each of them had motives. Each of them had helped. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. The sedatives in the dinner wine, administered by Edmund himself, the vehicles waiting in the underground garage, the family, unconscious but alive, transported to a location that Sarah suspected was somewhere deep in the mountains, a property that didn't appear on any official record. Were they still alive? That was the question that haunted Sarah's nights. Edmund's letters suggested they would be kept alive, forced to live as he had lived. Powerless, invisible, stripped of everything that made them feel superior. A prison of anonymity for people whose entire identity was built on being seen, being feared, being worshipped. She found one final piece of evidence in the ashes of the fireplace. A partially burned photograph of a young woman with dark hair and sad eyes. On the back in Edmund's handwriting, Catherine Maria Graves. 1989-2015. They took everything from you. I took everything from them. Sarah stood in the empty mansion one last time before closing the case. She'd written 2 reports. One official, full of dead ends and speculation about a family that might have fled their own legal troubles. Another private locked in her desk drawer that contained the whole truth. She thought about Catherine Graves, a young woman whose life had been destroyed by people who believed their money made them untouchable. She thought about Edmund, serving breakfast with steady hands while his heart shattered a little more each day. She thought about the Ashfords, wherever they were now, finally understanding what it meant to be powerless. The law said she should pursue this investigation until she found them. Justice said she should bring Edmund's accomplices to trial. But something deeper, something that lived in the part of her soul that had seen too many rich criminals walk free while their victims suffered, that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, some forms of justice existed outside courtrooms. She turned off the lights in the mansion and locked the door behind her. The Ashford case would remain open, but Sarah knew she wouldn't lose sleep over it. Some disappearances, she decided, were meant to stay mysterious. Some debts could only be paid in the currency of suffering. As she drove away, rain beginning to fall again, she thought about Edmund's last words in his final letter. They used to say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but I have learned that revenge is best served with patience, with planning, and with the invisible hands of those you never bothered to see. I was their butler for 40 years. I was also their witness, their judge, and ultimately their executioner. And when my heart stops tomorrow, I will die knowing that the last thing I gave them was the gift of understanding what they took from others, the gift of fear, the gift of powerlessness, the gift of knowing that money cannot buy you salvation from the sins you have committed. Sarah pulled over at a rest stop and made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She took the private report from her briefcase, the one that contained all the evidence, all the connections, all the truth, and she fed it page by page into a trash can. Then she lit a match. As the flames consumed the paper, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not quite peace, but something close to it. Sometimes, she realized, the most important thing a detective could do was know when to stop detecting, when to let the scales balance themselves in ways the law never could. The Ashford estate would eventually be sold. The fortune would be distributed to distant relatives who hadn't earned it and didn't deserve it. The city would forget about the family that once dominated its skyline and its headlines. But Sarah would remember, and somewhere, she believed, Catherine Graves was finally resting peacefully, knowing her father had loved her enough to spend his final breath making things right. As Sarah drove back into the city, the rain washing away the last traces of ash from her fingers, she allowed herself a small, sad smile. Justice, she had learned, wore many faces. Sometimes it wore a badge and carried a gun, and sometimes it wore a butler's uniform and carried a lifetime of patient, burning rage. She would file her official report in the morning. Family disappeared, likely fled the country. Case suspended pending new evidence. And she would sleep soundly that night, knowing that the only witness who mattered had already given his testimony, written in letters to a daughter who would never read them, but who would finally be avenged. The chandelier in the Ashford mansion still swayed slightly in the empty house, casting dancing shadows on walls that would never again echo with the laughter of people who thought they were invincible. And in the county morgue, Edmund Graves rested in peace, his secret carried to the grave, his life's final work complete. What would you have done if you were Detective Mitchell? Would you have burned the evidence or pursued the truth no matter where it led? Drop your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that blur the line between justice and vengeance. Until next time.